Buffalo consistently ranks among the top cities in the United States for violent crime for a reason. As a matter of fact, in 2024 alone, the city saw over 2,000 violent crimes, including shootings, assaults, and robberies. Now, that might not sound like much compared to larger cities, but when you punch in the fact that Buffalo's population is just under 300,000, the picture starts getting clearer. One of the most troubling aspects of crime in Buffalo is gun violence. In 2022, the city made national headlines after a mass shooting at the Tops supermarket on Jefferson Avenue. A lone gunman, driven by racial hatred, opened fire, killing 10 people and injuring 3 others.
Anger, shock, and sadness in Buffalo tonight as people mourn the 10 victims of what police are calling a racist murder rampage at a grocery store. Tonight, the accused gunman is being held in isolation and is on suicide watch as people mourn their loved ones who were targeted because of the color of their skin.
It was a tragedy that shook the nation, but it was not entirely shocking for many people living in Buffalo. The thing is, if you live in Buffalo for at least 5 years, you'll become acclimatized to the persistent gun violence in the city, especially in neighborhoods like the East Side. To help you understand the gravity of what we're talking about, in 2024, Buffalo had 30 homicides, many of them involving firearms. That's nearly double the national average for a city of its size. Gangs like the LRGs, or local Rochester gangsters, and Montana Avenue Boys have been linked to most of these shootings and other violent crimes in the city. Their turf wars have turned some neighborhoods into battlefields, where innocent bystanders often get caught in the crossfire. Take, for example, the 2019 case of a 12-year-old boy who was struck by a stray bullet while playing basketball outside his home. Is it collateral damage or government indifference to gang affairs? It depends on whom you ask. However, one thing is certain: it's always the innocent who pay the price. If you live in Buffalo, it's not only stray bullets you need to keep an eye out for. You also need to keep an eye on your car. In 2022, the city saw a sharp rise in car thefts fueled by a TikTok trend that showed people how to steal Kias and Hyundais using nothing more than a USB cable.
A crime alert involving 2 popular car brands. Police are warning about a TikTok trend showing how criminals can use a USB cable instead of a key to start Kias and Hyundais.
And the cases are growing across U.S. and Florida. News4JAX reporter Vic Micolucci shows new video where 3 teens were arrested accused of doing that this week.
All the passengers, keep your hands out of the window so we can see your hands.
Buffalo residents, criminals, absorbed that lesson. Hook, line, and sinker. And within a few months, 1,000 vehicles had been stolen from the city, the highest proportion of any other city that majored in that course. As a matter of fact, it's gotten so bad that some residents have resorted to sleeping in their cars to protect them. And who could blame them? After all, desperate times call for desperate measures. But we can't actually talk about crime in Buffalo without addressing poverty. The city has one of the highest poverty rates in the country, which we'll discuss more later in the video. In the meantime, poverty and crime go hand in hand, like 2 sides of the same coin. When people are struggling to make ends meet, desperation often leads to bad decisions. With the levels of crime I've mentioned so far, one question must have crossed your mind. Where are the police? Well, the police are there, supposedly doing their best. But their best is like trying to use salt to combat icy surfaces during strong blizzards, which surprisingly is really a thing people do in Buffalo during those infamous blizzards. We'll circle back to that later. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that the police department in Buffalo is understaffed. In 2024, Buffalo had just over 700 officers for a city of nearly 300,000 people. To make matters worse, the relationship between the police and the community is strained. Accusations of police misconduct and racial profiling have created a deep mistrust. After the 2020 protests following George Floyd's death, tensions in Buffalo reached a boiling point when a 75-year-old protester was pushed to the ground by police officers, leaving him with a fractured skull. The incident was caught on video and went viral.
A reaction coming this morning, a video that shows a 75-year-old man being pushed to the ground by police at a protest in Buffalo, New York.
And this video has been viewed millions of times since it happened yesterday. A warning, it is disturbing.
That was the straw that finally broke the trust between the police and the people they're supposed to protect. In the early 20th century, Buffalo was in its golden age. It was one of the richest cities in the United States, However, following the rapid suburbanization after World War II, Buffalo was hit below the belt. The city lost all the glory that made it the City of Light. Today, an estimated 28% of its residents live below the poverty line, with a median household income of $42,000, placing it behind only Miami and Cleveland. The housing market is not helping the issues either. Over half of Buffalo's tenants spend 35% or more of their income on rent, classifying them as housing cost burdened by U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development standards. Alarmingly, almost a third of its tenants spend 50% or more of their income on rent, while surpassing the threshold of cost burden. For minimum wage earners, it can only get worse. Now let's do some mathematics. As of January 1st, 2025, the minimum wage in Buffalo and the rest of upstate New York is $15.50 per hour. For minimum wage earners working full-time, 40 hours per week, their monthly income would be approximately $2,480 before taxes. If rent is around $970, which is the average in Buffalo, this would account for roughly 39% of their pre-tax income, exceeding the 30% income to rent affordability guideline by every standard. However, in a rather fortunate twist of fate, Buffalo was named the hottest housing market for 2025 due to high demand and limited supply driving prices up sharply, with 2 new jobs created for every home built. The city's economy attracts young families and professionals. Home values are expected to rise by another 2.8% this year, following a 5.8% increase in 2024. If snow had a capital city, it would be Buffalo. No offense to Yakutsk. To understand Buffalo's blizzards, you need to know a little something about Lake Erie. This massive body of water sitting right next to the city is both a blessing and a curse. During the warmer months, it's a great spot for fishing, boating, and lazy summer days. But come winter, that lake turns into a snow-making machine. You see, when cold Arctic air blows across the warmer waters of Lake Erie, it picks up moisture, and by the time it hits Buffalo, it dumps that moisture as snow. Lots and lots of snow. It's called lake effect snow. Take the blizzard of 77, for example.
Tonight's big story centers on the big blizzard of 77 as it continues to pound western New York.
And even when it began to subside, the gravity of it all was just dawning.
The streets of Buffalo looked more like the face of the moon than major arteries of the Queen City of the Lakes.
It began in late January, and for 5 straight days, Buffalo was buried under snowdrifts as high as rooftops. Cars were abandoned in the streets. People couldn't get out of their homes, and entire neighborhoods vanished under a white blanket of chaos. Remember a while ago I mentioned that people often use salt to combat icy surfaces during Buffalo's strong blizzards? Guess what? It didn't work. I'll tell you why. Agronomy 101 teaches us that salt is effective only up to a certain temperature, usually around 15 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 9 degrees Celsius. Below this threshold, it becomes less effective and ice can still form. The blizzard of 77 had temperatures around negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 51 degrees Celsius. Do you now see why it couldn't work? In November 2014, the city was hit yet again by another blizzard. It was so intense that it was called Snowvember. For 4 days, snow fell so hard and fast it felt like the sky was trying to erase the city altogether. Some areas received so much snow that people had to dig tunnels just to get out of their homes. What's wild about these blizzards is how quickly they can turn a normal day into a nightmare. 1 minute you're driving to work or heading to the store, and the next, you can't see more than a foot in front of you. It's called a whiteout. And if you've never experienced one, count yourself lucky. As a matter of fact, people even joke that the city has 2 seasons, winter and construction. One of the biggest environmental concerns in Buffalo stems from its industrial past. Back in the day, when steel mills and factories were the city's heartbeat, no one paid much mind to where the waste went. It was a time when people believed the earth could swallow anything without complaint. Toxic chemicals and pollutants were dumped into the waterways and soil without a second thought. Fast forward to today, and that neglect has left a stain. The city's soil in many areas is laced with industrial waste, making it unsafe for farming or even for kids playing in the yard. Then there's the issue of water. Buffalo sits by one of the largest Great Lakes, a treasure trove of fresh water. But even treasures need protecting, and the lake hasn't been spared from human carelessness. Over the years, untreated sewage, industrial runoff, and agricultural waste have found their way into Lake Erie and the Niagara River. The air isn't free from the chaos either. The city has struggled with air pollution thanks to its mix of industrial activity, traffic, and even weather. When the wind shifts just right or wrong, depending on how you see it, the city can feel like it's choking on its own breath. Smog hangs low on certain days, making it harder for people with asthma or other respiratory issues to go about their lives. Even the wildlife in Buffalo has taken a punch or two. Polluted water means fewer fish, and fewer fish mean hungry birds. It's a domino effect, where one problem tips into another. All hope is not lost. The city is growing again. Young people are coming back. Many government projects are springing up, and measures are being put in place to mitigate the effects of future blizzards and reduce the crime rate. All hands are on deck to bring back prime Buffalo City. Make sure to check out other interesting videos on our channel. Like and share this video to spread awareness. If you haven't already, subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss out on our future content. Thank you for your support. This is World Tour. See you in our next video.